Hey guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. So today we're going to talk about how to find your author's voice or how to find and develop your writing style. And this is a video that has been requested so many times. Every time I do a Q&A, there are always questions on how do I find my author's voice or develop my writing style. And for a while, I never really intended on making this video because, and I'll be very honest with you, I don't think I'm going to say anything that groundbreaking in this video. And that's because there is no real way to rush this. You can't really expedite this process. I think there are bad habits that can kind of harm the process of finding your writing style, but there isn't really a way to just sit down and overnight your writing style will click. It really is something that just comes from practice and getting comfortable with the writing process, getting comfortable to the point that your writing style is natural. It's something that I think you can work towards, but it's ultimately just something that's going to happen with time, with practice, with a lot of patience. And really the best thing that you can do is just continually engage with your writing. And eventually your writing style will start to solidify and you'll get more comfortable with it and you won't have to work at it as hard. It'll just be a natural part of your writing process. This is something that can take time. A big part of being a newer writer is finding your voice. It's hard to do that consciously, but it will just happen. Something will click. You'll write a piece of work one day and go, oh, that's my writing style. Even from then on, it'll continue to change and it'll continue to evolve and morph and grow. So the first thing that I wanted to say is when you're in this process of trying to find your style, just write in your natural style. The best thing that you can do to find your writing style is to accrue hours of practice. You know, the 10,000 hours theory, has that been debunked? I don't know. But I don't think the idea that practice helps with any skill has been debunked. I think that is very true. The best thing you can do as a newer writer or a writer who's trying to find your style is to just write in your natural style. Because what I see a lot of new writers do is they have this aspiration for what they want their style to be, and it's usually something that's a little more elaborate, something that's a little more flowery. They want something very beautiful and lush, and I get that, but it takes time to get there. And it takes time to be able to do that well. And also, that's not the only good writing style, right? And so what I see a lot of new writers do is they have this idea of what they want their style to be, and unless the words are coming out like that on the page, they just don't really write. They get stalled, they don't produce a lot of work. They get very easily discouraged because their work doesn't sound the way that published work does. That's the worst thing you can do if you're trying to find your style, because you're not writing. The worst thing you can do is force yourself to write in a style that's not yours, because then you're not developing your own style. You're forcing yourself to write in a way that is not natural for you, and that's why a lot of newer writers end up with purple prose. I think purple prose typically happens when newer writers are forcing themselves to write in a style that is not their natural style. So just write in your natural style and write a lot. Yeah, these words you're writing right now, they might be practice words, and that's okay. Write as much as you can. The more you write, the more practice you get, the more your own natural style will just start to develop. It will become more heightened and more interesting. That just takes practice, and you're not going to get that practice in if you're forcing yourself to write in a style that isn't natural for you. That's really how you're probably going to end up with purple prose. That leads to my next tip, which is to really just embrace practice over perfectionism. You will develop a stronger connection with your own writing style, and by that I mean the ability to just sit down and write in a consistent style that feels natural for you and that you're happy with. You'll get to that point of connection with your style better if you write a lot rather than if you're focused on perfectionism. It's like almost a feel thing, you know? Like, you're not going to find your writing style by just meticulously crafting a few beautiful paragraphs. And ideally what you want is to get to a point where your style is natural, right? That's what it should be. And it doesn't mean every sentence is going to come out perfectly on the first draft, but it does mean that you shouldn't have to force it. And that just takes practice. And the more you can practice and the more words you can write, whatever is a realistic word output for you, because obviously we don't all write at the same speed, and that's totally fine. You'll build that closer connection with your style and it'll be natural for you to write, which is what you want. My next tip, and I think this is so important, is learn to line edit. Developing your style in terms of actually heightening it. You know, I think actually writing the words and just writing a lot of words, that's what builds your ability to just sit down and write on any given day and have it be in a style you're happy with. But in terms of actually strengthening that style and making that style itself crisper and more effective, I think that actually happens in line editing. I didn't have a strong writing style until I learned to line edit, because there's this magical thing that happens when you learn to line edit which is everything you're doing in line edits starts to happen in the first draft. If you have goals for your style, you want it to be crisper, more beautiful, more intricate, whatever, but you're not ever letting your work get to the later drafts, you're only ever writing first drafts, you're not going to get there. When you learn to line edit, and you line edit really rigorously, and you really put so much care into line editing, everything you're doing in line editing starts to happen on the first draft, and eventually you need fewer and fewer and fewer drafts of line editing. When I was in university and I was in a writing class, my first ever semester of being in a fiction workshop, and about halfway through the semester, the prof was like, it's really magical because all of your styles are starting to appear. At the start of the semester, I could pick up any of your stories and read a paragraph, and I would have no idea whose work it was because you all sounded the same, because you were all making the same mistakes. But now that you've cleared away all the mess, your individual styles are shining, and now I can pick up someone's work, not look at the name, and know almost immediately whose work it is. This prof really had a strong emphasis on teaching us to line edit, how to cut redundant adverbs, and how to eliminate filters, and how to just rearrange a sentence to make it shorter and punchier. I would do so many drafts. I would print my work and line edit it, and then I would do 5, 6, 7, 8 drafts of that before I even submitted it to the class, let alone then getting everyone's line edits back. And line editing for other people helps you develop the skill as well. And it was through that process of line editing that my own style started to emerge and started to clarify. And it was during that semester, the last story that I wrote for that class was the first time that I felt like I saw my style appear on the page. It just happened. If there's one thing that I think you can do to expedite this process of finding your writing style, it's to learn how to line edit. I'll leave some videos that I've done on line editing below. One of them is so old. My next tip, and this is so important, is to prioritize clarity. It's really important, especially if you have a more figurative or flowery or intricate writing style, that you really prioritize clarity. Because I've said this before, but writing is only ever going to be as strong as it is clear. You could have the most beautiful prose ever, but if it's not conveying to a reader, it's useless, because the reader needs to be able to take away some meaning from that beyond just this really intricate sentence. Now, if the really intricate sentence clearly conveys its purpose, that's incredible. I absolutely had this phase where I was prioritizing the artfulness of my prose way above the clarity. And so my work just had so many clarity concerns. I was focusing on really the wrong things. You can absolutely have artsy prose, but you need to focus on the clarity first. That really should be the number one priority. I have a whole video on clarity, so I won't rehash all the points, but I'll leave a link to that in the description. I do think it's a really, really important topic. My next tip, and this is also something that I think I've talked about in previous videos, is to remember that you should be building voice in the strong words, not the weak words. Now, every once in a while, might you intentionally use a word into a sentence because it creates voice? Sure. But overall, you don't want your style to be built on weak words. You want your style to be built on strong words. The most important words for your writing style are nouns and verbs. Those are the load-bearing words in a sentence. And then followed by that is adverbs and adjectives. Those are words that you should only be using when necessary, and you should be using really intentionally. And a lot of the time, your style will actually be improved by removing them. And then finally, there's everything else. Prepositions, conjunctions, interjections. Those things you might have to tweak to adjust to, say, like the time period. But for the most part, your style is not going to be found in like the articles and the prepositions. So really focus on the strong words, which is the nouns and verbs especially, and when you use them, the adverbs and adjectives. Tip number 6, read avidly, but don't consciously emulate. Reading avidly is a fantastic way to develop your style because it's word input, and it's great to get plentiful amounts of word input. That's so beneficial. It helps in so many ways. It improves your vocabulary, it exposes you to new types of sentence structure, and it just keeps words and prose and writing constantly in your mind. I think of reading as fuel for writing. I would definitely recommend reading a ton, read authors you admire, but I wouldn't recommend consciously emulating them. It's okay to have, writers whose style you admire and you're like, that's kind of aspirational for me, is to be able to write like this. Then read their work. Those techniques will get into the subconscious, but you don't want to be sitting down trying to consciously emulate another writer, because then you're not building your own style. It's going to be like what I talked about at the beginning, where you have to write in your own natural style in order to build that connection with it. And that won't happen if you're forcing yourself to write like someone else rather than yourself. Your writing style is your personality on the page. Even if there are other writers whose styles you think are beautiful and you admire them so much, that doesn't mean that you have to write exactly like them in order to be a good writer. You want to write like the best version of yourself, not like a knockoff of someone else. It's going to make it harder to write. You're not going to be putting in that time, that practice towards finding your own style. If you read work you admire, qualities of it that you admire will get into your brain, will get into your subconscious, and you might start to see echoes of it in your prose. Tip number 7, I think it helps to save words that you want to come back to. You know, reading is a great way to strengthen your vocabulary. It's great to note down words that you come across in your reading, or if you're using a thesaurus while you're writing, there might be other options that don't fit in the context you're using but that you think are really interesting words. Save them. You can look over that for inspiration. I like to save details that I want to use too. I have a whole note where I save verbs that I like. Building these tools for yourself of things that you can reference is really helpful. These are great, I think, tools that you can build for yourself that you can kind of turn to when the inspiration is maybe running a little dry. Tip number 8, remember that not every sentence has to be the best sentence ever. I was in this phase when I was just on the cusp of kind of clicking with my writing style, and so it was kind of there, but it was also too purple and too embellished. I got a little overexcited. Sentences like, he turned around. I would think, how do I make that more beautiful? How do I make that more exciting? Instead of turn around, I would use some weird verb, you know? I'd be like, he pivoted. I would try to come up with some fanciful way of saying that he turned around. That's just a utilitarian sentence. It doesn't need to be any fancier. There's nothing wrong with it. I had a friend, and I've quoted this before because I thought it was fantastic, who, one of the best prose writers I've ever met. He was like, I learned how to write the best sentence ever. I had this formula for the best ever sentence. So I felt like I had to do that in every single sentence. And then he said, if every sentence is the best sentence, none of them are the best sentence. You can get way too carried away feeling like every single sentence in your work has to be the peak of your style. It becomes too purple and your style actually kind of gets drowned out. You start using devices when they don't need to be used, and so they lose impact. It is okay for sentences to be simple. That's totally okay. You need those sentences. They serve an important purpose. Not forcing what is meant to be a simple sentence to be something complex just because you feel like it has to be, or that would make it more, whatever, exciting or impressive. You don't need to impress people with every single sentence. Some sentences just need to convey a very clear point. And then those sentences that really are truly impressive, they will shine even more. And finally, allow your style to change and develop over time. One thing that you may find is that you hit a point where you feel like you found your writing style. It kind of just clicks and suddenly you can write in it and it feels right. But then you might find that it keeps changing. Your style will continue to change over time as you change as a person. It will shift across periods of your life. It'll shift across different works that you write, and that's okay. There are periods of my life where I've definitely written a little differently, and I can see that. And it's influenced by a lot of stuff. I think it's partly influenced by what I was writing at the time. You know, I read back Honey Vinegar. I started the first draft in 2018, and I read it back, and I don't write like that anymore. Sometimes I feel like it's better than how I write now. It's important to know that your style will continue to change, and that's okay, because I think some writers can get a little freaked out, and they feel like they're starting to regress when they find their writing style and they're really excited about it, and then it kind of changes. And sometimes you don't know how to consciously adjust that. I still don't really know how to consciously make those adjustments, to be honest. It's just something that I think you have to accept and embrace, that your style will morph and change over time. So that's all for today's video on finding your writing style. I know that this is a very difficult topic to actually express because it's really something that just happens with practice. But I do hope that these tips can be some helpful guiding points if you're still in that stage, and maybe offer some sense of reassurance that it will just happen with practice and with time. I know it can be frustrating when you feel like you're almost waiting on your writing style to clarify for you. Don't let that hold you back from writing words until that point, because that's what's going to get you there. That's what's going to get you to that point of your writing style clicking, and then it's going to just be something totally effortless and natural. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!